to another episode of the Atlantic Soap Podcast. I am your host, Donald Campbell. That hasn't changed, but I have my first guest from out of state, out of New Jersey. I think it's my first guest. Now I'm gonna have to go through the archives, and people are gonna call me out of it. We have Davina Patterson from, and say your full name for the audience so everybody hears.
Yes, it's Disability Resource Network.
Disability Resource Network, and you guys are in Huntsville, Alabama.
We are located in Huntsville, Alabama, but we service 13 counties in North Alabama.
You service 13 counties, and this is such an important podcast because people don't understand how big the independent living network is, and they don't understand that if you go to a center in New Jersey, that if you move to Alabama, you could go to a center there as well, and it could look totally different than your center that you're used to working with now. So tell us, how did you get involved in disability? How did you get involved in this work?
Oh, wow. So this year, 2024, I will celebrate being in healthcare for 20 years. My first healthcare job was in 2004. So I just wanted to say that. But how did I get into independent living? That was your question, correct?
Yes.
Oh, wow. This is going to be an adventure.
All right. We like adventures on
You
this
like
podcast.
adventure?
We like adventures on this podcast.
Okay, so I started in 2020, February 2020. And you know what happened in
Oh, yeah, that was
right?
2020, as everybody knows, especially in the disability world knows, was a real easy year. You know, it was a casual year, nothing really happened.
Oh, yeah. Nothing happened, right?
It's a great year to get involved. Really nothing going on. So
right.
So how was that starting in 2020?
2020.
How was that?
Okay, so when I came in, I was told that there was funding for a center for North Alabama had started around 2018, and they were in the process of starting a center in this region. So in 2020, I brought in February of 2020. The next month, March of 2020, it was announced that we were on like complete shutdown. It was the pandemic. Everything closed. So I started at a very interesting time. I started in 2020, February 2020 was when I was hired. The next month, it was announced that the pandemic, everybody was in quarantine. So I was like, okay, are we still going to start? Is my job at jeopardy? I just started. I had left my previous job where I was working for 4 years to take this job. So the person at the time assured me that, no, we're going to continue on with the center. The funding is there. We just have to come up with creative ways on how we can do the work. Just like everybody had to come up with, creative and innovative ways to do the work. So I was tasked to start a new center of independent living in this area in 2020. And I got here by just simply, I saw an opening. I applied for the job. I interviewed for it, and I was selected to be the director.
Awesome. So tell us about, that's such a great experience. Tell us about, how did you manage to serve people and do this new job during the pandemic? Because that not only was that during the pandemic, that was during the peak of the pandemic. It felt, we all don't want to think about it again, but for a while there, it felt like the world was pretty much ending. It felt like it was sometimes, if we take ourselves back there, it felt like, are we going to get through this? So how'd you manage to deal with that stress and find creative ways to help people with disabilities?
Well, I was fortunate enough to, when I was brought into I was working under another center, under the umbrella of another center. Our center is what you call a spinoff center. So they were already an existing center. They were already set up. So we had to do our training and our operation under that center. But we kind of shared ideas of how we would be operating remotely, since that was our new way of doing business. So we, of course, had to adopt to work remotely, and we provided services remotely as well. We had a lot of virtual programs. We had to use our documentation, our paperwork. We had to make sure that that was available to be set up for like electronic signature, those type of things. So that's basically how we operated at that time. In our center, we're still doing remote work. And what we do is we do a lot of outreach. We try to schedule at least 2 in-person activities a week, but a lot of the work that we do is from home.
I will tell you that a lot of what you're saying really just sounds so familiar to me because
Yes,
you first you start thinking like, oh, how are we gonna do this? But then you realize that centers for independent living are actually perfect for operating virtually, and that there's really no service under our core services, our life skills, our transition, our peer support, and our advocacy and our information referral that you can't do over the phone or over the computer, and that it makes it actually easier for a lot of
it
our
does.
the people we serve if they don't have to come to an office or schedule an appointment like that, like so, and worry about transportation, especially if you're if you don't have a lot of transportation in your community, depending on where you are, it's not the easiest thing. So I just, I realize that too. And what you said about still operating virtually, we operate hybrid, and I don't think we'd ever go back to fully in the office, like because
Right.
we've just realized that it works that so that it we're able to reach more people, and like you said, we started doing activities out in the community. So tell us about those outreach activities. What do you guys do?
Okay, so some of the things we do trainings, we do workshops, we do tabled events, when they have expos, we attend some of those. We also do like health screenings with different like local health departments or the local hospitals when they have a mobile unit. We volunteered and we did in-person health screens that are free to the
Awesome.
community.
Awesome. So, and tell us about kind of what are the, because people think sometimes that all the challenges for people with disabilities are the same, but tell us about kind of, what are the challenges in Alabama when serving people with disabilities? Because I'm sure it may be different than New Jersey where I'm based. So tell us about how your local community plays a role in your ability to deliver services and the barriers that exist sometimes.
For our local community is very different. They've been very welcoming, very accepting of our Center for Independent Living. This is a philanthropic community. A lot of the nonprofits, we work together, we collaborate and partner, and they've been key in referrals, very key in collaborative projects and programs, sharing resources. So, disability in Alabama, what it looks like, there's not one way that it looks. This is the South, independent living did start on the West Coast,
Yes.
University of California at Berkeley.
Yeah, yeah.
So, just bringing disability awareness to the community and then consumer control challenges it's just different and it's new. So they're not used to that part of it. So just kind of introducing them to that and making them aware of the different types of disabilities. We have cross disability.
Right, right, right.
That's something different that we do than most disability organizations. So most people, when they think of a disability, they of course think of a physical
Correct.
disability. They're not aware about invisible disability.
Or I always they'll or maybe if they're senior, yep, or maybe if they're a senior citizen, they'll say, they'll have a disability, but they won't acknowledge that disability. I'm a senior,
Absolutely.
I'm not a disability. I'm like, I can't force you to claim us, but you're in with us too.
Yes, yes.
You're
So
in
yeah,
with us.
we see a lot of that where people actually aren't the awareness isn't there. They actually do have a disability,
Right.
but they don't self-identify as
Yeah.
a person.
Right, which goes back to stigma and goes back to all those things that exist. And that was a great point too about IL starting on the West Coast. It definitely has a West Coast vibe to it.
Yes.
And I can see how, it could be different to people in different parts of the country.
Yes.
And I always say, it's still a radical idea, people with disabilities in control and living independently. So like it's still, it's still just because we're in this world and we accept it, doesn't mean that everybody is aware or accepts it. So tell us about building your team. How big's your staff? How did you, because this must have been a real bonding experience. Hi, welcome to the cell. We're during the pandemic. I'm a new director. We gotta figure this out. Good luck to us. Goodbye.
Well, let me first start and say I have two great peer advocates that work along with me at Disability Resource Network, and hopefully you'll get an opportunity to bring them in so they can talk
Oh, I
about
love that. Yeah.
advocate and work and what that entails and what that looks like. The staff, both of the staff members are people with disabilities. Of course, we are consumer control. How did I build the staff? Most people would think that that would be a challenge for me to start a center with just from scratch, right? Then like no history there, no
Yeah.
employee history or anything. And how am I going to get people to buy our mission and buy work in this organization? And they're going to be the first employees. It was kind of a little difficult for me to kind of get into it myself as a director, but I had a very great mentor, Dan Kessler. He was the executive director of Disability Rights and Resources in Birmingham, and he really worked with me to understand independent living, how to operate a center for independent living, and what an independent living center should be. So he helped me to kind of recruit a team and provided me resources on how to recruit for board members as well.
Right.
They come from people in our community. Both our staff and our board members are people in our community. And one of our staff members was referred by the Disability Support Services at a local university. I let her know that I was looking for an employee, and if she knew someone, she said, I do. She said, I know someone, and he's been having a hard time trying to get a job. So she said, hopefully it'll work out. And I said, well, I would like to talk to him. So I talked to him during an interview, and we brought him in June, and we still had an opening for a part-time position. So when we were doing a virtual call, this young lady attended the call. She was invited by the executive of disability, who is very close to all the centers here in Alabama. She was invited to attend the call, so she was on the call, and everyone on the call, I got their contact information. So I believe I reached out to her because I think Dan was the one that helped me to identify that she was on the call. And I reached out to her and asked her, would she be interested in employment? And she said, interviewing for a job, this new center that we have in North Alabama. And she said, sure. And so she was referred by our local state governor's office on disability. I believe she had a relationship with him or had did some previous work with him, and he highly recommended her. So we interviewed her, and she started, I believe, in September of that same year.
Wow. And what you just said is so true. It really is just about it is all about the community. I mean, it sounds obvious, but I had a little different story than you. I also started a center from the beginning, and it is
Okay,
it is very challenging because you gotta
it
like
is.
you gotta like you said, it's hard to get people when you're figuring out, it's hard to figuring it out. It's hard to get people on board to figure it out because you're still learning every day. So you had the challenge of the pandemic as well, but it seems like you guys have found your footing and are growing. Do you have any plans for the future? How do you see it growing? Do you have any like things that you're interested in really building on?
There are some programs, of course, with additional funding, we'll be able to do it. But there are some programs that we would like to add to, in addition to our core services, that we feel that the community here would benefit from. We are a provider, but outside of being a provider, that we do a lot of legislative and advocacy work. So I would like to see our center grow as far as our staffing. I would like to see our employee benefits grow, and I would like to see more partnerships.
Yes.
That's what I see in the future, especially national major partnerships.
Yeah, and I think you have just the right approach, and just, you know, don't be afraid to take it slow, and to find out what works for you guys, and to, because I know, you know, as somebody, people see these centers, and the audience should know this too. There's centers that have been around 30 years, and they're big, and they got so much going on, and they got, and when I first started, I'm like, oh, what, how am I ever gonna, what is happening? You know,
Yeah.
it's like, what is happening? And you feel that pressure sometimes of, like, you know, I gotta be doing 50,000 things at 50, you know. But then you realize,
Yes.
you talk to those very successful directors, and you realize they started slow and steady, and then it took them years to get their vision implemented. So that's why I tell the audience that your sales are your sales are different. It really depends on where they started, what their community is like, what, you know, it depends on a bunch of things. So
Yes.
and that's the beauty of sales. I mean, that's what I love about it, is it's not a one size fits all. It's the same philosophy, but it can be implemented in a number of ways. That's the great thing about us. So what if, other than the pandemic, which is a huge challenge, but were there any surprising challenges that surprised you, or positive too? I'll say positive. Were there any, like, surprising? Because now I'm thinking, what about the negative?
Right.
Director that I would want. Like, so, what are some surprises? We'll just say that like you were like, wow, I wasn't expecting this.
Oh man, anything unexpected? I guess it's just it may be the turnover, just the turnover, the staffing shortage
Yes.
that's been very, so my mentor, the person that hired me, I think I was on the job, it was less, it may have been a year. It was definitely less than 2 years. So, he came to me and told me that he was retiring. So I was left, you know, I had to figure it out. And I had to figure, the person that I was working alongside had mentored me and
Right,
taught me just about everything. We were in the middle of me just so much and so much learned. I haven't learned half of what I need to know, but
right, right,
it kind of did interfere with my learning and my training.
right.
So that was so unexpected to see that happen. But I've been able to be connected with resources like ILRU, Nickel, April. I have a out of state mentor, through the April mentoring program, and I've been able to get no break in my learning or anything. I've been able to stay on track with learning and with growing as a center. Like I said, there's a lot for me to still know, especially about grants and funding. And
Yes.
I know and I'm positive that I'll get there.
Yeah. I'm still I just hit my 7 year anniversary this month, and I'm
Oh,
still
wow.
learning. Thank you.
Congratulations.
I'm still learning, and
You're
I'm still
welcome.
learning. So I just, I want this podcast to let anybody know who maybe is in the IL world too, that it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time, and be patient with yourself, because we have these great resources, but again, because IL is so, broad in a lot of ways, and people do it differently, you really got to
Right.
find out what works for you. So there is no, like, you know, definite way you have to do everything. So it's just figuring out what works for you. And that can be very overwhelming in the
You
beginning.
can. Yeah.
In the beginning, because you could talk to 5 people in IL, and they'll all give you a different answer, but you should be doing it what IL is.
Exactly.
So
Absolutely. I totally 100% agree with that. And
yeah,
so, we make it look easy, but
yeah.
it definitely isn't.
No, and there's, in funding, I always tell, this is a great education for our audience too. Funding is difficult too, because you have to have, your initial funding, your operating funding has to be enough
Right.
to support you in doing those things. So, and that's why it's so important to support your federal and state legislators in advocating for us out there, if you're listening to this podcast and enjoy your services, is
Right.
our ability to expand our programming is dependent on our existing capacity and our existing staff, so I just tell people that as was said, we make it look easy, but it's not easy. And we have such a broad mission to serve all people with disabilities in our community, that it can become very difficult. And what you said about staffing is hard too, because they need to be adequately compensated too, and they need support from our legislators too, because we all want to work yet for a living wage and be able to support ourselves. So it's just I have a lot of support for you if you need um what what do you think makes those unique? I mean, we know, but from your perspective, you were talking about other disability organizations, but what do you think so if you were to boil it down, what do you think sales bring to the table that maybe other organizations that do great work too, maybe,
Right.
but we do it differently. We have our our way of doing it. So what do you think makes us unique?
I think that we're consumer controlled.
Yes.
That's hard from most organizations. I mean, that's one thing that makes us just unique, that we're consumer controlled. A lot of people boards look different than ours.
Yes.
Their staff members look different from ours. So
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I like because and we'll just say it. There's again, there's disability organizations doing great work, but we are different in the fact that we have people with disabilities. It's consumer controlled, so people with disabilities in decision-making roles, people making decisions about how the center should run, how programming should run, what things should look like, working alongside people without disabilities. So it is different because a lot of times you go in the disability or be in the disability world and you'll look around and you'll be like, where are the people where are the people with disabilities? And they're in the room
yes,
because we all know that just because we're not seeing it doesn't mean it's not there, but it's not as we make a real effort to make it consumer controlled. It's mandated to be consumer controlled. So
right. It
it has
is.
to be. It
It
has
has to be. Yes, it
it,
does.
it has to be. How many centers does Alabama have? So we have 12 in New Jersey. How does it work in Alabama? Now I'm curious just for the audience too, because they may look at New Jersey and be like, well, they have 12, so therefore Alabama must have 12. So
Alabama has 4 centers.
wow. And you're the
For
newest
Centers for
one.
Independent Living in the state of Alabama. We're the newest one, yes.
Right. So
We
they
started in the
had
pandemic.
yep, and they had three. So they had three before you came aboard. So
Yeah.
no wow.
Servicing, I think we have 67 counties in Alabama.
Wow.
So it's 4 centers split in all 64 counties. We service 13 of those counties. I think Birmingham services about 22, and then the rest are split between Mobile and Montgomery.
Wow. I serve one county. Wow. And wow. So it just shows how centers can be different. That is such a big mission. That is such a big mission. And that, because I know counties can look way different from one county to the next, so that is a real challenge. I give the sales in Alabama a lot of credit. Way to go, guys. That's a lot. That's a lot of work.
It is.
That's a lot of work. What are some of the you said you guys and I'll end with this question, but you say you guys do a lot of advocacy. So what are some of the kind of things you see in our community that really need additional advocacy? What do you out front? What are like kind of your big issues, if there are any that really stand out in your mind? Like I know in New Jersey, housing is a big
Yeah.
thing, and you know, so is there anything unique to Alabama or that you see as kind of like the big three issues, or maybe one or two that really come across your desk a lot?
Sure. Transportation.
Yes.
Transportation is a very, very big barrier, huge deal here in Alabama. Housing is one, like you mentioned, employment and education.
Wow, I like that education. That I said I was going to end it, but you triggered another
How did I?
question. You triggered another question. So, what is it about education that you think really stands out? Is it not accommodating to people with disabilities, or is it just not funded? Like, what is the driving issue?
I think that, remember when I talked about the disability awareness?
Yes.
Sometimes in the school systems, that may be where the child is at the time, and it some things may go undiagnosed or unnoticed
Yeah.
for a long time.
Yes.
Maybe up to someone may be in middle school before they find out
Right, right, right. So you're
something.
kind of playing catch up with accommodations and support and
Yes,
knowledge and yeah, that's such a key point. And that, a lot of times cells by the time people get to us, a lot has happened. And then we have to kind of be that
yes,
support. A lot of life has happened. A lot of life has happened. So I'm always thinking like this is why, like you said, the awareness is so important. Because
absolutely
if we got involved in a situation earlier, it could have been maybe, handled differently or resolved differently, or
right.
you know, but people have sometimes a narrow sense of disability all throughout our country, and it you miss things. And yeah, I just think that's a really important point. Transportation too. So how does that, and see, I shouldn't have said last question because it makes me think. So transportation in Alabama too, how does that work? Like in New Jersey, we do have paratransit, there is Access Link. Does that exist in Alabama? Do they have some form of paratransit? Or is it, and by paratransit, just for the audience, I mean a bus that comes and picks you up at your home if you're in within a certain radius, within a certain bus stop. So do they have that in Alabama, or is it all just regular public transportation?
They have public transportation and there's some transit, but when you talk about your rural counties,
Yes,
there's not very many options.
right, right. Or if you're dependent on it, I'm sure it's not like quick transportation. I'm sure you're like could be waiting for a long time. So
Yeah, I've seen that too. I had somebody call from a rural county. They needed transportation to their doctor's office, and not very many resources to give them. So just
right, right. Yeah, and and I will close with this. Like sills, like I said, we're limited by the resources we have, and that I know when sometimes that people call, I'm sure people call you about housing all the time. When it's our
oh
name,
yeah,
people want to move in, and but it's such a limited resource because the truth is, and I'm sure it's like this in Alabama too, we just don't have enough affordable housing. And I'll do my PSA for people, when they're suggesting a housing complex near your neighborhood, you got to show up and advocate for it. Because what happens is a lot of people come out and they say, we want housing, just not here. We want
oh yeah,
we want to put the people with disabilities over there. We just don't want it.
right.
We just don't want to. We want it not in our community, but that's what keeps the housing shortage going. So I would just tell people that it is it's incumbent upon you to do the advocacy. I mean, that's what Centers for Independent Living and the independent living philosophy is about, taking control and and being involved. Nobody's going to do it for you. Like you did. You had to create the cell at the end of the day. And
I did.
your website looks great. It all
Thank
looks
you.
great. You're doing great work. And I'm so happy we had you. I'd love to have you on more and your staff on as well. Because
I
I think it's important for listeners of the podcast, people in IL,
yes,
to know that there's such a broader network out there.
absolutely.
All right, anything you want to say in closing for the audience? What if you're in Alabama? And we'll put all this information in our
Yes.
bio too. What if you're in Alabama what should they follow you guys on social media? What anything you want to plug? Anything you want people to know about?
Absolutely. They should follow us on social media. We have Facebook, Discourse Network. Our Instagram is DRNAL256. Give us a call if you are looking for any services, independent living services. Visit our website, www.drn256.org. We have our service application there. We have resources there, our phone number, address, if you need to contact us. All of that information's there. I try to stay visible in the community. So if you ever see me any questions you'd like to ask me, just ask. And I'm here to assist. I'm here as a resource. I'm here as a professional to help you in your process in your journey of living, reaching independence.
Right, right. That's great. That's great. And I would also say, just to give a plug, I mean, if you listen to this being like, oh, I don't know anyone in Alabama, but somebody I know is moving there, like centers are a great place to ask if you have a disability. That's the first thing I tell people. A lot of people move and they think all their New Jersey resources are going to carry over to some other state. It's like, no, that's not how this works a lot of times, unfortunately. So it's always great to talk to yourself. I mean, and ask, what's your Medicaid program like? What's transportation like? What's the support network like? That's what people with disabilities are doing, and that's what SOLs are, giving you a resource center with expertise that you can draw upon. So it's just important, if you know somebody with a disability moving and you're in a state and you're like, well, they're moving to Alabama, I don't know what it looks like for them. Call and ask us Phil, and they'll tell you because they know better than
Yes.
most exactly what's going on, exactly who you should talk to about what program, exactly what, I just remember people calling saying, I didn't expect to lose this or gain this whatever benefit when I moved. It's like, well, states are different. States are different.
Absolutely. It's very correct.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. And And like I said, you were my first out-of-state guest, and I hope to continue this trend. So if you're listening out of state, please contact me.
Well, thank you for having me. I kind of feel under the weather, so I'm not sure if it came through while I was speaking. So I said I'm not going to miss it.
I think you did great. I think you did
We
great.
still this, and either whether I'm sick or if I'm doing good, I'm going to be here.
I think you did great, and get some rest. You did great, and please reach out because I'm always wanting to support other directors in this journey because it is a fun journey, but you do need support to get through it. So
Yes, you do.
I'm glad we connected. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, bye.
Bye.